The maze in this game is infinite. You can move around for ages and ages but never reach the end. That's because many tricks have been used to make the world seem endless. First, I'll show you around. You are this black blob, and start in the middle of this snow-enclosed chamber. You can't see much, but every step you take reveals more of the world around you. After a short walk, you encounter this, a black strawberry. If you've lost some health, black strawberries can heal you. Next, you encounter a map, which reveals the shape of the whole room. That seems to be an enemy. If it bumps into you, you'll get hurt, but if you bump into it, it will get hurt. Kill it and move on to the next room. We're plunged into darkness once again, so the only thing we can do is explore. Every room may contain more enemies or strawberries, but will definitely contain a map. If you collect a map and kill all of the enemies, every strawberry in the room will be automatically collected. Once the room is clear, you can see that we now have 3 paths to choose from. Each path will take you to a different room, with more enemies and strawberries, so keep progressing forward. The ultimate goal of the game is to earn as many points as possible before you die, since there is no objective last room. Nearly everything of value gives points, so this should give you the gist of things. Explore, eat, and kill as much as possible. Knowing now what this game is, why did I decide to make it? Mainly, I wanted to test my ability to make a game endless. I chose an exploration game because I thought something like an endless runner would be too easy, and a platformer would require more effort to perfect the controls and collisions. This way I can set up the basic mechanics of the game very quickly, things like movement, collision, and items. This allows me to focus more on the way the world is structured rather than the more mundane things. Another major consideration is that I've recently struggled to finish any programming projects within a timely manner, so I wanted to work on something I could finish relatively quickly. In practice, this meant the game took just over a week to finish. That being said, I'd now like to showcase how I designed some of the features in this game. The most important element is the room structure. The room layouts are actually all designed manually. What's special about them is the way they connect to each other. All the rooms, except the first, are contained within a list, and every time you exit a screen, a random room is retrieved from the list. The previous room is not saved anywhere, which is why you can't go back to a previous room. I was considering using a tree structure instead, meaning every room would have references to the next 3 rooms and the one previous, allowing you to go back and forth between different rooms. But it quickly became apparent that it would be more effort than it's worth, especially since there's not much reason to backtrack to previous rooms. Once this structure was established, the goal then became to maximize variance between rooms, since you're likely to encounter a room with the same layout as a previous. One way to achieve this was by adding darkness. Primarily it means you can't enter a room and immediately know where to go, but it also means that depending on where you start, you may be in a room you've already seen, but just don't know it. At least not until you explore a bit. Every room starts out completely obscured in darkness, and individual tiles are removed if they're deemed visible by the player. I suppose this mechanic can be compared more to the idea of knowledge rather than physical light, but that's not really relevant to the game design. There's also another key way the game adds variation. Every room has a difficulty value randomly set between 0 and 1, and these rooms also contain a specific set of objects called spawners. Before a room is entered, every spawner calculates a random number between 0 and 1, and if it's less than the difficulty value of the room, it becomes an enemy. Otherwise, it becomes a strawberry. This means that every room you enter has a different ratio of strawberries to enemies, so it may be crowded with enemies and little to no strawberries, or no enemies at all. One benefit of this design choice is that it incentivizes taking note of the first things you see in a room and deciding whether to leave as soon as possible or stick around for the desirable spawn patterns. Since enemies are worth more points, it may be worth it to stick around in a difficult room if you have health to spare. I mentioned before that every room also has a map, but it's actually always in the same spot, so if you can identify which type of room you're in, you can then know where to find the map. Once you get the map, all enemies are visibly moving, But what you can't see is that when enemies exist in darkness, they can't move at all. I decided to make it this way so that the player can't get clobbered by an enemy they can't see. By the way, the enemy AI in this game is very simple. Every enemy has its own random response time. For every tick of the response time that passes, the enemy will attempt to move either left, right, up, or down, but if the path is blocked, it won't move at all. Some enemies may be significantly faster than others, so once you uncover an enemy, it's important to examine its behavior in order to deal with it accordingly. One thing I really appreciated throughout working on the project is how I never really had a strict plan, but elements seemed to fall into place as I learned what could and couldn't be done within the scope of the project. I didn't originally think of adding darkness and maps, but I did when I realized I couldn't add a moving camera, and whole rooms would be visible at once. They seemed like simple additions at first, but clearly deepened the strategy of the game. The same goes for the random difficulty values of the rooms. I only added them as a substitute for truly random room designs, but in the end I think they turned out to be quite interesting mechanics in their own right. I don't have much else to add. Of course there were a lot of other things that went into this project, but I think I'm happy talking about the most important and hopefully interesting stuff.